Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is Dr. Farhad with the course Fundamentals of Philosophy. Today we are here for lecture number 13, and as per the routine, let's have a look the summary or the precise points we already have covered in the previous lecture. If you look back at the previous lectures, we have started this course or the series of this course from the introduction of the philosophy, that what is philosophy and what are the main characteristics of the philosophy. And later on we have we have discussed the components of the different ancient philosophies, including Chinese philosophy, Indian philosophy, and the Islamic philosophy. And then later on we have started the Greek philosophy, the ancient Greek philosophy. And before going into the components of the Greek philosophy, because Greek philosophy is being followed by or practically implemented by the contemporary European philosophy. So it's better that we should look at the history of the Greek philosophy first, then we will move towards the components and the branches of the Greek philosophy. So far as up till this lecture, we have discussed the main eras. I mean, up till today's lecture, we have discussed three different eras of the Greek philosophy, including the Dark Era, which includes the dark time and the before archaic era philosophy and the philosophers. And we already have discussed that no prominent contribution except the Iliad and Hesiodo's work cannot be found this time period. That is followed by, I mean, archaic Dark Era is followed by the archaic era or the archaic philosophy. Archaic philosophy is basically a foundational era or the foundational point, foundational stone for the classical philosophy, including the philosophers which have laid down the fundamentals, rules and the philosophies, including Thales, Parmenides, Heraclitus, and so on and so forth. So archaic era is basically the starting era of the Greek philosophical journey, and archaic era is followed by the classical era. And in the last lecture we have discussed the first most prominent and the famous philosopher of the classical era, that is Socrates. And we already have discussed that the philosophy and the existence of the philosophy and the name of the philosophy cannot be remembered without the name of the Socrates. Those who know philosophy, they know Socrates as well. So today inshallah we are continue our discussion, our description on the classical era. Okay, just as I mentioned that the classical philosophy or the classical era includes the philosophy of the three main philosophers, and they have a beautiful coordination with each other. I mean, this philosophical era or this classical philosophy started from the Socrates, followed by his student Plato, and then the student of the Plato, Aristotle. But here I would like to add one more thing over here. It's not the point that these three philosophers were the only philosophers in the Greece at the time of the classical era. Rather, there are some other philosophers and the philosophies also exist, just like the Sophist philosophy also can be a prominent philosophy during the time period of the classical era. But these three names have a great impact on the history of the Greek philosophy later on the European and the modern philosophy as well. This time period of the Socrates was included from 470 to 399 BCE, and that is followed by the philosophy of the Plato, that is from 428 to 347, and also followed by the time period of the Aristotle, which started from 384 to 322 BCE. And then no later school of thought, including the Epicurean and the Stoic philosophy, has been followed by the archaic, followed by the classical era. So let's have a look, because we already have discussed the Socrates, its philosophy, its impact on the Greek civilized society. So let's have a look. Today is the philosophy of the Plato. But the name of the Plato can be famous. We can say that the name of the Socrates is dependent on the name of the Plato as a philosopher, and the name of the Plato's philosophy is dependent, initial philosophy of the Plato is dependent on the philosophy of the Socrates. How? Because Socrates has never left any written work of his philosophical work. His all philosophy, his all philosophical work can be found in the writings of the Plato. And Plato's initial work, Plato's initial philosophy is all about the dialogue. I mean, it's his initial book, his initial writing was with the name of the dialogue. And the dialogue was all about the dialogue of the teaching methodology, or the discussion methodology of the Socrates, where some of the students present the philosophy of the Socrates into the form of the dialogues. Later on, I mean in the later time period of the Plato, he has presented his own work in the form of his own philosophy, that is his political book. So if we look at the all trial and all the things which are happened to the Socrates, the Plato was the one who has recorded and who has basically conveyed all things, all the philosophy and what happened to the Socrates during the time period when he was being punished, when he was being executed, and when he was being given the poison as a punishment of his speaking truth. So just as we can say that when Socrates says that Ethan is a sluggish horse, and I am the godfire to sting it back to the life. I mean, the Socrates was the first person who has started awaken the philosophical thought and the wisdom of the people of the Athens. The later on, this work has been this waking up the people of the Athens were being continued by his student Plato. So always when you find the dialogues, you will find the dialogues of the Socrates being recorded by the Plato. So if we look at the life and the history of the Plato, unlike the Socrates, I mean the Socrates was from an average middle class family of the Athens, but unlike the Socrates, the Plato was from the aristocracy family of the Athens, and he was from the upper class family of the Greek society. His father Ariston is descendant from the kings, and his mother Patrician is from the Greek statesman family. I mean, from both sides, from his father and mother, he was from a rich family. He was basically a direct student and a very loyal student of the Socrates, and he has the Socrates philosophy has a great impact on his initial writings. So Socrates usually is the main character in many of the Plato's writings, many of the Plato's dialogues, and he was also influenced by the pre-classical philosopher, including Heraclitus and Parmenides, especially in the form of their scientific philosophies, and also the Pythagoras. And Plato has experienced two major events which has greatly impacted on his philosophy. One was his meeting with the philosopher named Socrates, and this has impacted on his initial writings of his philosophical work. And the second was the war between the Athens and the Sparta, and this incident has really impacted the Plato's axiological philosophy towards the philosophy of the state. And Plato basically served and ended up with the we know that this by the end of this war, the Athens and the democratic society was being in decline by the Sparta. So this incident has impacted the philosophy of the Plato and later on he has his philosophy and his philosophical thoughts are being compiled based on the state and the axiological philosophical thought. If you look at the work and the contribution of the Plato, the first in the early period occurs during the Plato's work on the Socrates, just as I mentioned earlier. His initial work was all about the teaching and the philosophy of the Socrates. But in the second era, in the second phase or in the middle period, the Plato writes in his own voice on the central ideas of the justice, courage, wisdom and moderation of the individual and the society. So later on, his book, his compilation, The Republic, was written during this time, and with this exploration of just the government ruled by the philosophical king. And in the third stage, the Plato's work was about the metaphysics and the scientific thoughts that is being influenced by the Heraclitus and the Parmenides philosophy. So his idea of theory and his philosophy of idea and the forms are being influenced, are being recorded in his third stage of the philosophical work. So we can say that initially the Plato's work was all about the philosophy of the Socrates, and later on his own work, or we can say the main incident which happened into the life of the Plato, where that was a war between the Sparta and the Athens, and he recorded and he has written a compiled or a formulated work in the form of the Republic, and later on his work was being compiled as a scientific theory of the Parmenides and the Heraclitus. So Plato was very much famous even today among the academicians, among the people of the academia, among the people of the knowledge, for his famous allegory of the cave. Plato's allegory of the cave, what was that allegory and how it reflects his philosophical thought and how this impacted on the minds of the intellectual people later on as well, because this allegory or this story is about we can say a traveling or a journey of a nation and a man from the ignorance to the light, from the information to the knowledge, and from the part of his the information given by the others and the knowledge he basically one gets from his own experience and from his own senses. So his allegory is famous for the knowledge, and especially when there will be a discussion among the in the academia about the difference between the information and the knowledge. The main foundation was being always quoted in the form of the Plato's allegory of the cave, because it blows the mind of a wise person that how a true knowledge can be attained. So what was the allegory? If we look at what was the allegory of the Plato's, according to his allegory, his allegory of the cave, the Plato mentioned that there were some men in a dark cave, and they were being chained. These human beings were chained into a dark cave. The only light they have in the form of the fire behind them. You can see in the picture as well. So their information or their knowledge was all about, they can see through the reflection of that fire. So right beside them there were men who have carried some shadows, some things in behind them. So whenever they reflect these characters or these things on the walls in front of these chained human beings, they basically get the idea of the information from them, and then they named it accordingly, just like pet, animal, dog, and something like that. And they were so much content with the information has provided to them that they think this is the whole world which is being considered as knowledge for them. One day, one of them unchained himself and get out of the cave. So when he came out of the cave, so he found a new world in front of him. I mean, he can see the real picture, the real form of the water, the real form of the birds, the real form of the sky, the real form of the trees, the real form of the air, the real form of the everything he can feel and he can touch. So here he got the idea that he was being deceived by the information provided by the others in the form of the knowledge. So he went back to his fellows and told them the whole story, that what is outside, what type of knowledge existing outside this cave. But rather than accepting his idea, rather than accepting his knowledge or his true knowledge, his other fellow beings killed him. They killed him. So this is what the idea can be taken from this whole allegory, or what the Plato is trying to tell to the mass, to the audience, that this in behind this story there was the story of the Socrates, who was the real king, of the knowledge, who was the philosopher, who was a wise man, and who has provided the people of the Athens the true knowledge, the true forms of the knowledge. But he was being killed by his own people, but he was being murdered by his own people. So this was the murder. This was not the murder of the Socrates. This was the murder of the knowledge. This was the murder of the philosophy. So at the same time, this allegory gives the idea of the difference between the knowledge and the information, because in the form of the shadows, this is basically the information we receive from other. In the form, I mean, listening or any other form, or reading, or getting knowledge or getting information from any other source, which is not direct information, which is not direct knowledge. But when going outside of the cave, or going outside of this dark cave and getting the knowledge by your own naked eyes, was the true knowledge as being received by this man, who basically according to the Plato's allegory, was the Socrates. And upon getting back of taking the true knowledge through his rationale, through his own naked eyes, rather than being thankful to providing the true knowledge, his own fellows basically killed him, because they have so much contented on the knowledge they have been provided in the form of the information by the others. They even don't want to accept the true form of the knowledge. So this is the same happened to the Socrates, that when he tried to give the knowledge to the people of the Athens, rather than accepting him, rather than respecting him, they basically killed him. Because if we remember in the previous lecture, I already have mentioned that when the trial of the Socrates was being conducted in the jury of the 500 people, so he courageously said that rather than giving me punishment, I should be given a prize. I should be rewarded that I have informed you about the true form of the knowledge. So this allegory is even famous among the people of the academia, the wise people, to differentiate between the information and the knowledge. So Plato's allegory is about the the idea of from the information to the knowledge, or this is basically, we can say, a foundational stone or a foundational point of the epistemological ideas, epistemological philosophy for the Greek philosophy. Usually people, according to the Plato's allegory of the cave, usually people take ideas of the things through the reflections, that just like the humans in the cave, and they rely on the senses, and they rely on the sense perception, similar to the living in a cave where the men mistakes shadow for the substance. They take the knowledge in the form of the information. But for the true knowledge, we should look through the logic, wisdom, and the reason. Reason is the only thing through which we can take the true knowledge, and the knowledge is justified through belief that it can be attained through your own rational and through your own wisdom. Plato has also recommended that the truth should be like a mathematical, axiomatic truth, and truth should be accepted accordingly. And axiomatic truth are the man who has basically provided them the real information, real true form of the knowledge. If we look at the relationship between the philosopher knowledge and the wisdom, so we should remember the allegory of the cave, that the reflection and the shadows were basically the ignorance and the information provided by the people who were behind, the people who were chained into the cave. So we can say that this is a lesson in the allegory, that we should not hold the true information from the people, we should tell them the true spirit and the true form of the knowledge. And secondly, when this information is being taken by yourself, just like Socrates, if you have informed the people about the knowledge, the one who has provided knowledge is just like a wise, just like a knowledgeable person should be regarded, rather than being given a trial. And he also concluded in this form that the real crime of the Socrates, just like the man who basically unchained himself and came out of the cave, because he has disrupted, his crime was a disruption of the society of the Athens, and ordered by the questioning, revealing, and the norms. The main crime of, according to the Plato, main crime of the Socrates was that he has basically awakened, he has basically questioned the ignorance of the people of the Athens, and he was being basically given punishment of his own honesty with the knowledge and the truth. So Plato's allegory was famous for the knowledge and the epistemological basis of the knowledge as well. But this allegory has also given a foundation for the Plato's other philosophies as well, just like the idea of the dualism. And idea of the dualism is basically based on the metaphysical philosophy of the Plato. And before going into the details of this philosophy of the dualism, let's have a look of the archaic philosophy. If we look at the archaic philosophy, that during the time period of the archaic philosophy, the one main thing was common among all the archaic philosophers. They believe in the monistic substance as the origin or as the existence of this world. But unlike the archaic philosophers, the classical philosophers have given the idea of the dual substance. And if we look at the Socrates, he also believed in the rationality, or the knowledge, and the difference between the knowledge and the information. That was a dualistic idea, that was a dualistic philosophy of the Socrates. The same goes with the Plato as well, because he has given the idea of the origin of the life and the existence of the life in the form of his dualism, in the form of his dualistic philosophy of the world of ideal world and the world of forms. So what was that idea? He basically, when he quoted the allegory of the cave, he said that the people who were chained and into the cave, they basically have the same idea of the ideal world and the forms. So there was no difference for them what they were thinking. They found it on the wall in the form of the shadow. But the one who came out of and unchained himself and came out of the cave, he basically got the idea different from what he has been given in the ideal world or where he was. So he says, in every human existence, in every human thought, in every human imagination, or every human life, or even the life on this whole universe, there were dualistic theory that is being working. One that is being existing into a mind, and where we think, we imagine the reality of the things, and he relates it to the idea of the we can say the area of the Parmenides, where the things are not changing. I mean, he says that into our ideal world, what we think, that cannot be changed because that is an ideal world. But he says that the other world which is existing in front of our naked eyes, that is the idea of the Heraclitus, where he says that the things are getting changed. Every moment is changing, every motion is being changed. We cannot step into the same water twice. So he says that the Parmenides talks about the world of ideal, where our imagination, where our thoughts are being their thoughts are being functional, and the things, the nature of the things remains the same. But into the real world or the material world, the things are being changed. They are being changing their forms, their motion and everything. इसको हम इस तरह से कह सकते हैं कि प्लेटो के जो आइडिया था फिलोसफी का, या प्लेटो का जो आइडिया ऑफ द डुअलिस्टिक फिलोसफी था, वो बिल्कुल डिफरेंट था, बिल्कुल अपोजिट था उन फिलोसोफर से जो कि आर्काइक टाइम पीरियड के अंदर फिलोसॉफिकल डोमेन थे. क्योंकि दो आर्काइक फिलोसोफर जो थे वो वन सब्सटेंस की फिलोसफी के ऊपर बिलीव करते थे, और वो कहते थे कि ज़िंदगी का जो आगाज़ है, लाइफ का जो स्टार्ट है, वो एक ही सब्सटेंस से हुआ, और उससे आगे चीज़ें जो है वो एक के बाद दूसरी जो है उनकी फॉर्मेशन जो है वो होती गई. लेकिन प्लेटो ने कहा कि जस्ट लाइक द एल्गरी ऑफ द केव, उसने ये जो एल्गरी ऑफ केव का जो आइडिया दिया, उसने कहा कि हर इंसान के पास दो तरह की जो है वो उसकी जो उसका वर्ल्ड है, दो तरह की उसके पास दुनियाएं हैं. एक उसकी इमेजिनेटिव वर्ल्ड है, जिसको कि वो आइडियल वर्ल्ड कहता है, जिसमें वो कोई भी चीज़ जो सोच रहा है उसकी फॉर्म, उसकी शेप, उसकी हैयत जो है वो चेंज नहीं होती. लेकिन जो दूसरा वर्ल्ड है दैट, और उसको वो रिलेट करता है पार्मेनिडीज का जो कि आर्काइक फिलोसोफर था उसके साथ, कि पार्मेनिडीज का जो आइडिया ऑफ सब्सटेंस है कि चीज़ें चेंज नहीं होती, ये हमारी आंख उसे देखती है और हमारी आंख का धोखा होता है. तो उसने कहा कि ये पार्मेनिडीज का वो आइडियल वर्ल्ड है जिसकी वो बात करता है. लेकिन इसके साथ साथ वो कहता है कि हेराक्लाइटस का जो रियल वर्ल्ड है, जो मटीरियल वर्ल्ड है, वो भी एग्जिस्ट करता है, क्योंकि इंसान का जो आइडियल वर्ल्ड है उसमें चीज़ें चेंज नहीं होती. लेकिन जो मटेरियल वर्ल्ड है उसमें आपकी जो चीज़ों की जो फॉर्मेशन है, चीज़ों का जो फॉर्म है, वो टाइम और स्पेस के अकॉर्डिंगली वो चेंज होती है. तो इसीलिए हर आने वाले लम्हा पिछले वाले लम्हे से डिफरेंट होता है. इंसान मुख्तलिफ होता है, इंसान की सोच मुख्तलिफ होती है, इंसान की फॉर्म्स मुख्तलिफ होती हैं, इंसान की चीज़ें जो हैं मुख्तलिफ होती हैं. सेम गोज़ विद द अदर सब्सटेंस ऑफ दिस यूनिवर्स, के बाकी जो चीज़ें हैं, सब्सटेंस हैं, बाकी जो चीज़ें एग्जिस्ट कर रही हैं इस कायनात में, वो भी उसी तरह से चेंज हो रही हैं इस मटीरियल वर्ल्ड के अंदर. लेकिन आपका जो आइडियल वर्ल्ड है उसमें चीज़ें जो हैं वो बिल्कुल सेम हैं और एक जैसी हैं. सो ही बेसिकली कॉल्ड इट द फिलोसफी ऑफ द डुअलिज्म, और इस फिलोसफी को प्लेटो जो है वो आइडिया ऑफ द डुअलिस्टिक फिलोसफी ऑफ द नेचर ऑफ द थिंग्स के ऊपर जो है वो बेस करता है. Okay, if you look at the Plato's idea about the axiology, यानी प्लेटो का जो आइडिया था अबाउट स्टेट, अबाउट सोसाइटी एंड अबाउट द लाइफ, दैट वाज सिमिलर विद वन एंड अनदर. यानी प्लेटो का जो आइडिया था अबाउट एक्सियोलॉजी, अबाउट मेटाफिजिक्स एंड अबाउट द एपिस्टेमोलॉजी, वो तमाम का तमाम एक दूसरे के साथ लिंक्स था, और वो उसको एक जो अपनी फिलॉसफी है, अपनी जो एक थीम है, उसमें उसको प्रेजेंट करता है इन द फॉर्म ऑफ ऑफ द बॉडी सोल वर्च्यू एंड स्टेट थेरी, यानी प्लेटो की एक थेरी है जिसको वो बॉडी सोल वर्च्यू एंड स्टेट थेरी कहता है। अच्छा, इस थेरी के अंदर वो कहता है कि देयर आर the three components works in behind the every body soul virtue and statement theory, or the state components or the states functions, यानी जो तीन components work करते हैं बॉडी के सोल के, और वही कंपोनेंट्स जो है वो एक्सोलॉजिकली वर्च्यू में भी काम करते हैं, और वही कंपोनेंट्स जो हैं उसी तरह के तीन कंपोनेंट्स जो हैं वो आपकी स्टेट को चलाने के लिए भी चाहिए हैं। उसमें वो कहते हैं कि जो बॉडी के जो तीन कंपोनेंट्स हैं उसमें आपकी बॉडी का हेड है, चेस्ट है और एब्डोमेन है। यानी आपका हेड उसी तरह से इम्पॉर्टेंट है जो आपको चीज़ों के मैसेज को कंसीव करता है और आगे आपके चेस्ट को भेजता है। आपका चेस्ट उसको ट्रांसफॉर्म करके, उसको कंपोज करके उस मैसेज को फिर आपके एब्डोमेन को भेजता है, जिस तरह से आपकी बॉडी का फंक्शन जो है वो मेटाफिजिकली चलता है। सेम गोज विद द सोल। वो कहते हैं सोल के अंदर जो आपकी रीजन है दैट वर्क्स लाइक अ हेड, यानी आपकी जो रीजन है, आपकी जो अकल है वो आपके हेड के अंदर, आपके सर की तरह जो है वो आपकी सोल के अंदर काम करती है। और आपकी ये जो रीजन है दैट इज बीइंग कंट्रोल्ड बाय द विल, यानी आपकी सोल के अंदर जो आपकी विल है वो आपकी वर्क करती है जस्ट लाइक योर चेस्ट, यानी वो आपको उसकी तरह से उसको ट्रांसफॉर्म करती है आपकी सोल के अंदर की जो आपकी थॉट है। और उस विल के बाद आपकी जो थॉट है, आपका जो भी आपके थॉट प्रोसेस के अंदर जो नॉलेज है वो आपका एपेटाइट्स के ज़रिए जो है वो आपका कंपोज होता है और उसको जो है बैलेंस करता है। इन दिस आइडिया ऑफ द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द बॉडी एंड द सोल, एंड ही सेज दैट द सेम गोज विद द वर्च्यू एज वेल, यानी यही चीज़, यही फिलॉसफी आपकी वर्च्यू के साथ भी जो है वर्क करती है इन द फॉर्म ऑफ द विजडम, करेज एंड द टेम्परेंस। अब विजडम क्या है? ही सेज दैट विजडम वर्क्स लाइक अ रीजन इन द सोल एंड हेड इन द बॉडी, यानी विजडम वही काम करता है जो रीजन आपकी सोल के लिए करती है और हेड आपकी बॉडी के लिए करता है। और वही विजडम जो है वर्च्यू के अंदर आपको जो है आपकी वो विजडम जो है वो आपको मैसेज देती है आपके करेज को, यानी आपके करेज को मोटिवेट करती है, आपके करेज को जो है वो प्रोवोक करती है फॉर एनीथिंग गुड और द बैड। लेकिन उस करेज को आपकी जो एब्डोमेन है जो बॉडी का, या आपकी जो सोल की जो एपेटाइट्स है, वो टेम्परेंस की फॉर्म में उसको जो है वो कंपोज करके फिर उसको आइडिया की फॉर्म में जो है या आपके जो आर्गुमेंट की फॉर्म में उसको जो है वो प्रेजेंट करती है। यानी कोई किसी भी वर्चुअस आइडिया को पहले विजडम जो है वो जो है उसको लेता है, उसको ओरिजिनेट करता है, और करेज उसको ट्रांसफॉर्म करके टेम्परेंस की बेसिस के ऊपर उस लॉजिक को और उस आर्ग्यूमेंट को प्रेजेंट किया जाता है। एंड सेम गोज विद द स्टेट, यानी जो ह्यूमन सोसाइटी है, जो ह्यूमन स्टेट है, वो भी इसी बेसिस के ऊपर गवर्न होती है। उसमें जो रूलर्स हैं दे वर्क लाइक अ हेड इन द बॉडी, रीजन इन द सोल एंड विजडम इन द वर्च्यू। यानी आपका रूलर जो है वो जितना कॉम्पिटेंट होगा, जितना स्किल्ड होगा, आपकी बाकी जो फंक्शंस हैं उस तरह से काम करेंगे। बट उस रूलर को अपने फंक्शंस को चलाने के लिए एक्सेलरीज चाहिए होती हैं, आपको फोर्स चाहिए होती है, आपको सोल्जर्स चाहिए होते हैं, आपको एक कंस्ट्रक्टिव बॉडी चाहिए होती है, और वो कंस्ट्रक्टिव बॉडी उसके लिए प्लानिंग करती है, उसके साथ मिलकर उस रूलर के साथ एक फॉर्मेशन बनाती है स्टेट की। बट टू इम्प्लीमेंट दैट फॉर्मेशन, इम्प्लीमेंट दैट प्लान, द स्टेट ऑलवेज नीड द लेबरर्स। तो प्लेटो कहता है कि वो जो लेबरर्स हैं आपके, वो बेसिकली आपके बॉडी के अंदर एब्डोमेन का जो आपके सोल में जो एपेटाइट्स है और आपके वर्च्यू के अंदर टेम्परेंस है, वही का फंक्शन जो है वो आपके लेबर्स जो हैं वो आपकी स्टेट के अंदर करते हैं। सो इसीलिए वो कहते हैं कि जो परफेक्ट रिपब्लिक है, उसकी जो बुक है, उसमें वो कहता है कि जो गार्जियन रूलर है वो दैट क्लास मस्ट बी ट्रेन टू मैनेज द परफेक्ट स्टेट, यानी अगर स्टेट को अच्छे तरीके से चलाना है तो वो जो आपका रूलर है वो मस्ट बी ट्रेन्ड और दैट मस्ट बी स्किलफुल। और जो सोल्जर्स हैं वो ट्रेंड होने चाहिए उस सुपरविजन ऑफ द रूलर, so that they can plan and they can implement, but for the implementation आपको वहाँ पर laborers या workers चाहिए हैं to implement or to functionally or practically उस work को जो है वो execute करने के लिए, and to produce the goods for the state. So that in that way a healthy body can work, a healthy soul can work, a virtuous life can be lead, and a welfare state can be established. और इसीलिए वो उसको कहता है कि जो इस तरह का रूलर होगा वो फिलोसोफर किंग होगा और फिलोसोफर जो है वो रूलर होगा. ओके, इसमें इस स्टेट के अंदर जो आइडिया देता है प्लेटो, उसमें वो कहते हैं कि वुमेन शुड आल्सो बी द पार्ट ऑफ द ट्रेनिंग इन द एकेडमी. यानी वो इस स्टेट के अंदर वुमेन की जो है पार्टिसिपेशन को भी जो है वैल्यू करते हैं. और यही वजह है कि जो प्लेटो ने अपनी एकेडमी बनाई थी उसमें उसने वुमेन्स के लिए भी ट्रेनिंग और मेंस के लिए भी की पार्टिसिपेशन जो है प्लेटो की एकेडमी में जस्ट लाइक पाइथागोरस जो है उसने इनकरेज किया था. और उसका ख्याल था कि अ स्टेट दैट डज नॉट एजुकेट वुमेन इज लाइक अ मैन हु ओनली ट्रेन्स हिज राइट हैंड. आई मीन वो कहते हैं कि औरत जो है वो आपके दूसरे हाथ की तरह है. अगर एक आदमी अपने एक हाथ को ट्रेन करता है दूसरे को नहीं करता तो उसकी परफेक्शन, उसकी स्किल्स जो है वो इनकम्प्लीट रहेंगी. So if we look at the work of the Plato work and the Plato philosophy has been divided into the three different parts. One, the Plato's philosophy and the philosophical thoughts influenced and based on the philosophy of the Socrates, and in that philosophy the Plato has only presented the dialogues where the main character of the Plato's discussion and the dialogues were the Socrates. And if we already have discussed regarding the allegory of the cave, axiologically the Plato has presented the idea of the good and the bad, and the one who basically give the idea of the good and awaken the people to get the idea of good is basically as a character of the Socrates being always punished or being always being given punishment by the society. So his initial work was based on the Socrates. Later on, the Plato has basically experienced a war between the Sparta and the Athens, and this war has greatly impacted on the philosophy of the Plato regarding the need of a society that should be well trained, that should be well equipped by the all bodies, including the rulers, auxiliaries, and the laborers as well. And then the Plato's idea, the Plato's philosophy based on the nature of the things, existence of the things, as I have already mentioned in my lecture, that was based on his dualistic philosophy. As we mentioned that his philosophy of dualism is different from that is a starting point or the initial foundational stone of a discussion between the monistic philosophy and the dualistic philosophy regarding the origin of the life. So his dualistic philosophy was based on the two archaic philosopher Parmenides and the Heraclitus, that in the ideal world the things remains the same, but in the material world the same things which were existing in the ideal world can be changed, their forms, their motions, and everything, and their structure. So this idea is basically his metaphysical idea. So in a summarized form, if we look at the work of the Plato and the philosophy of the work, it has impacted the human philosophy and today's philosophy on all three domains of the epistemology, axiology, and the metaphysics, because in the metaphysics he has presented the idea of the real world and the material and the ideal world, and the ideal world and what is the difference of the nature of the things into the material world and the ideal world. And in the axiological work, the Plato's idea was based on the allegory of the cave, where the one who has presented the idea of the justified true knowledge, justified true belief has been punished by the people, and he has given the idea of the virtues. We can also add that his idea of the virtue is basically requires that the wisdom needs courage, but along with the temperance. I mean, if you're a wise man, you need a courage, just like Socrates, but you also required a temperance to present your logics, to present your argument as well. So, lastly, the Plato's idea of the axiology was also can also be found in the same theory that a society or a state requires a ruler that should be well equipped and well trained according to the skills, and he has the ability to lead the people. But at the same time, that ruler can also be helped, or we can say supported by his forces. They are being called their auxiliaries, their soldiers. And because he felt that in the war of the Athens and the Sparta, the main failure was on the part of their auxiliaries as well. So he felt that the soldiers should be trained for the wars, but under the ruler class. I mean, they should be well equipped by the ruler class, and the ruler class should also participate into the war, into the trainings of the war. And thirdly, he says regarding the axiological ideas that the laborers are really important. They should be given importance because they are the one who basically run the society, who basically implement the policies of the rulers and the guardians into the society. And additionally, the most important thing, or we can say the difference between the Plato and the Socrates, was that the Plato was of the opinion of the participation of the women into the politics and into the society in the practical form. He said that the women should be participated. The women should be encouraged to participate, because he said that the state does not educate women is like a man who basically only trains his right hand. And even in the academy of the Plato, the women were encouraged to participate. And if we maintain a difference, and if we look at the difference between the Plato and his immediate student Socratic Aristotle philosophy, that is totally different with one another. I mean, when the Plato talk about the upward substance of the dualistic philosophy, at the same time the Aristotle talks about the idea of the forms and the substance into downwards world. So Plato idea and Plato's philosophy has great impacted on the later on philosophy of the Greek philosophy, later on in the Roman philosophy, and then into the European philosophy of today's world as well. So we'll inshallah stop here, inshallah, and we will continue our discussion in the next class with the philosophy of the Aristotle, who was a student of the Plato, and his philosophy has greatly impacted into the classical era. Why this era is being called classical? Because of the we can say a condemnable or the remarkable philosophical ideas of the Socrates, Plato, and the Aristotle. So this is all for today. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.